You can't shoot a cannon from a canoe. Okay. What am I talking about? Well, we're talking today about a subject that deals with the fact that we approach every client, especially our athletes, from a 360 approach. And one of the main reasons why we do that happens to be because of the lack of work in what we call the posterior chain. What is it? Well, we're going to be covering that today with Charlie Marlowe on the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personal Edge Fitness. Really appreciate you joining us for this podcast. As always, my guest today is Charlie Marlowe, one of our client coordinators here and our athletic coordinator here. So thank you and welcome to the show as usual, pal.
Thank you.
Before we get into this and talking about this rather interesting subject, I want to tell you how to get in touch with us if you have any questions about this podcast or any others, or any questions, as usual, about dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness. You can reach out to us at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also contact me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. That is also our website and our Facebook page. Hit us up on Twitter at Team PE if you are so inclined. Okay, posterior chain. Sounds like a new cereal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure does.
I didn't know if that's where we're going with today or not. Is that something from the Kellogg company? Does that have the false claim like Kellogg cereals do about lowering cholesterol? I didn't know what it was. What is posterior chain?
People probably hear that a lot. And like, you should chain your posterior chain, but what is it? And it's made up of the posterior side of your body, so the back side, which is your back, your glutes, your hamstrings, and your calves. So essentially, in the intro, you talked about you can't fire a cannon out of a canoe.
Right.
And, what does that mean? Well, the posterior chain provides stability for your mirror muscles. And so,
I love that.
A lot of people, you think about your mirror muscles, you got your chest, you got your arms, your quads, so the front side of your body, which is, what people can see in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right. And so more times than not, people are going to focus on those more so than the posterior chain because it's what you see in the mirror, right? So
absolutely,
you want those to look good.
Beach day training.
Yeah, beach
body.
body.
So
yeah.
Exactly. So where's that snack bar? Well, that of course be over that way, showing off the massive bicep and what have you. So yeah, that would be typically the front side. The back side being, like you say, that is what we're talking about today, the posterior chain. And you're right, highly neglected. Mm-hmm. So we talked about that on a podcast recently about overworking the chest. The guy who had International Chest Day, every day was a chest day.
Right.
So you that are so inclined that every day is International Chest Day, then yeah, posterior chain is something you need to be concerned with. Okay, but why?
Yeah, so why? And coming from my background from a sports performance perspective, it's going to improve your capacity for performance. So what I mean by that, we said it before on this podcast, but all of the power as an athlete comes from your hips, right?
Right.
And so that's going to be your glutes. That's where, all the force is going to be coming from when you're doing sprinting, jumping, throwing. And so it's going to improve your capacity for performance, bring up all those other qualities that you are training for as an athlete. And then other two would be decreasing injury and then improve posture, which I think everybody needs improved posture, right? I mean,
absolutely.
In this day and age where we sit a lot, on our phones a lot, hunched over, training that posterior chain where you're strengthening, your upper back in particular, that can provide the support necessary whenever you're hunched over. It's just going to help reinforce those good posture habits.
Right. I stole that quote from you that I used in the intro, talking about, you can't fire a cannon from a canoe. And you think about that. That's simple. You've got so much force coming out of that cannon that's going into a very light craft that's sitting on top of the water. It's just going to blow the boat backwards. That's the same thing if you're going to develop a chest. But you don't have the opposite opposing muscle, that opposes that, strengthened. You're going to cause injury. Most muscle pulls are caused by an imbalance.
Sure.
And then you're not going to have the support behind it, basically what you're running. But the other thing I think about how many times we hear people giving advice as far as working on their lower back. And the first thing most people think of is abdominal work.
Yeah.
And it kills me when I would hear that, because people talking about, I do all this ab work for my back. I'm thinking, what about the erector spinae? What about what about quadratus lumborum? What about these lower back muscles that we've got in that area to protect? And that's what we're talking about in that posterior chain. It's not just on the back side of the upper part of the body either, right?
No. So in reference to the abdominals, people often refer to abdominals as core training, and they forget that the back part of your core, they don't think about your back muscles being a part of your core when it's really a 360
absolutely.
Spectrum. It's not just the front side that you need to train. So that's why we throw in a lot of side planks, things like that, to work the 360 spectrum. But really, it's called the posterior chain for a reason, because like a chain with links, they're all connected. And if the weakest link is going to break, then that's where you're going to see the injury, is in that weak link, right? So if you have, weak hamstrings, but you're, over your back and your glutes are strong, that's going to be where you're going to see the breakdown, is in the weak link. And so that's one of the benefits of working with a professional like us here at Personal Edge, is we can very easily pinpoint those weaknesses, right? Through different exercise selection, we can see, oh, well, this person is, weaker in their glutes, so we need to target this specific exercise to be able to bring that up.
Right. We also have that a lot of times when we have either an athlete come in, or a lot of times a parent of an athlete, they'll go to diagnosis. And that can be challenging at times. What I mean by that is they'll come in and say, look, my son, my daughter wants to get better at this sport, wants to get faster on the field, wants to get stronger. Great, that's fantastic. We can take it from there. We'll do the evaluations, find where the weaknesses are, do an interview, not only of the parent, but also of the athlete themselves, and find out where the weaknesses are. So mostly we can find that out through evaluation. But what I'm talking about is they quickly go to diagnosis. And that is, okay, he's weak, so therefore he needs to do a lot of quad work. He needs to do a lot of chest work. And that typically, that thought process is what a lot of times creates this, not looking at it from a 360, standpoint, which is going to make them miss, like you say, the posterior chain. Typically, that's the one that's the largest, most neglected muscle in the body, is the hamstrings. I mean, we talk about that a lot about, gosh, this guy was going to win the 100 meters and he's going to win the gold, but he pulled up. Well, it's not going to be a quad.
yeah.
It's going to be a hamstring. So definitely. All right. How does this play into developing an athlete's program and putting it all together so that we don't end up with these weaknesses?
I can actually relate to this on a personal level, because I've dealt with this firsthand. So when I was in high school, for whatever reason, I didn't know at the time, but I was experiencing a lot of low back pains. Every time I squatted, it was very unusual, because it just came up all of a sudden. I tried everything I could to fix it, but for whatever reason, it wouldn't go away. Not long after that, we had our combine where we ran 40-yard dashes, and my senior year, I ended up pulling my hamstring on a 40-yard dash. I'm running full speed ahead, right there before the 40, it pops, and I have to break down really fast, and that was attributed to what I, at the time, didn't know. But a lot of people think, I got low back pain, it's my back that's the issue.
Right.
That might not necessarily be the case. A lot of times, if your hamstrings are weak, it causes them to be tight. And so a weak hamstring that's tight and pulling on your low back is going to shift your pelvis to where it's pulling on those low back muscles, causing the low back pain. And so at the time, I didn't realize, what that was, but my hamstrings were the issue because of the hamstring pull that I later found out. And I actually ran into that again while I was at Jones playing football. I pulled it again my freshman year. And so I come to find out, my hamstrings are the issue. I need to strengthen my hamstrings. And my strength coach at the time at Jones, he was very big on eccentric training, which we've talked about that on the podcast before.
And that is the eccentric training. I know we brought it up, but before you go over that, you've got a concentric and an eccentric movement in every lift.
Yep.
If you think about doing a bicep curl, when you're bringing the dumbbell up towards the shoulder, that would be your concentric contraction. And the eccentric would be lowering the muscles, lowering the weight, which actually does more work on the muscle than the concentric. Sorry, just a quick clarification if you didn't pardon me for interrupting you.
No, it's good for clarity, because but like I said, I saw that firsthand of working with a professional who knew, okay, this is what I need to prescribe to help his issue, and that is weak hamstring. So we overloaded that eccentric portion and spent a lot of time in that area, and that carried over. And I didn't have any more hamstring injuries after that. It was really cool to see. And so being on the other side of the table now as the trainer, the strength and conditioning coach, to be able to see that and to help athletes I think it's pretty cool that I can relate to them in that way.
No, I'm sure. It's amazing how making mistakes are some of the best coaches. That's for sure. But, okay, with your hamstrings got stronger, how'd your lower back do?
Yeah, my lower back, the pain went away as well. So, I mean, as I continue to strengthen my hamstrings, I haven't dealt with low back pain at all since then. Awesome. I think that is a big contributor, and being able to realize, okay, like I said earlier, it is a chain. It is all connected, link to link. They don't work independently of one another. They all work together. And so as I began to learn more about the body and how they all tie together, I think that's kind of helped my understanding of, how to train it properly.
This is why when we have an athlete come in, usually, if you think about it, rarely do we have anybody come in that is saying, okay, I want an all-over program, want everything to get better. Usually and I understand that, there's a weakness that you've noticed, you've picked up on it, I want to work on this weakness. Well, this is why we take it from a comprehensive approach. I mean, that weakness is, you think about it, I'm going to get better at throwing. So basically we're going to work, the right-handed, so all we're going to do is work the right arm. Well, no. I mean, like you say, all of your power comes from your hips. That's that pivot point. Not only do you have a lot of muscles in that area, but it's also the pivot point, transferring any kind of strength from the legs, even in a running motion involved, into the upper body or what have you, that's going to transfer through those hips. That's going to affect throwing. And this is why the posterior chain is greatly affected by all this, but because of the fact that we do have to attack this comprehensively. Put this to some exercises that you typically address and why you address them. And I think that sometimes when you prescribe these, you actually started working on these, you had athletes somewhat perplexed. Why are we doing this exercise?
I love different exercise variations. We
I know what you're trying to avoid saying, because the one you want to talk about the most, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the deadlift, because we've already talked about that on the podcast.
Absolutely.
December's coming up actually this Friday, so Josh and I are already getting on each other about that. Right. So the deadlift is a great one. I think it's one of the best in terms of it's a full body compound exercise. So you're not only targeting your glutes, your hamstrings, your low back, as most people would think, but also your upper back, because you're having to stay tight, prevent any rounding through the spine. And so I think that is a great overall exercise to teach. You don't have to start with a barbell, like we've already said. You can start with regressions and work your way up to a barbell deadlift or to a trap bar deadlift. So we've got different ways to do that. The next one that I would definitely recommend is pull-ups, chin-ups, any kind of vertical pulling variation, because that's going to help a lot with shoulder health, just maintaining healthy shoulders. And also, as far as relative body strength goes, if you can do a chin-up with your body weight, I think that says a lot about your relative strength in terms of where your strength is compared to your body weight is what relative strength means.
I've always said if you want to look for one exercise, that you may disagree with me, but if you look for one exercise to tell you what kind of shape you were in, if you're in good shape, but you can only use one, you're only limited to one, but you're only limited to one exercise to basically tell you, are you in good shape? Not only strength, but also overall, body fat, this kind of thing. What is the one exercise? I've always said it's a pull-up, because the strength to weight ratio makes really important. So you would probably say deadlift, I'm sure. But.
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to agree. I mean, with the chin up, especially because I remember in football, our strength coach was very particular about chin ups, form, and everything, and especially with the linemen, because they're the bigger guys, and they're like, "Coach, I can't do a chin up. Like I've never done chin up." And it would be awesome, really cool and awesome to see, because he would get those guys to do chin-ups,
Oh, wow.
I mean, there's different variations he might do. They might just do negatives, where they hop up there and then slowly come down.
Do an eccentric contraction.
Eccentric contraction. But, throughout the season, we would see some of our O-linemen that are, 260, 270 plus guys doing body weight chin-ups, body weight pull-ups. And so it's definitely doable. But again, that plays into their relative strength, and it really is good for athletics, being able to control your body weight, I think says a lot about your overall athleticism. So a chin up, pull up, I think that's a great telltale sign to where you're at total fitness wise.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. Of course, as you know, being with the background in not only pole vaulting but also gymnastics, one of my favorite exercises. So, but you also touched on one a minute ago, and where you're about to touch on it possibly, but the hamstring curl. Huge fan of that one. So
hamstring curl, isolating the hamstrings. I think the compound movements are great, but anytime you can do something that isolates them. We have several variations you can throw, whether it's a machine or with a band, to isolate the hamstrings. Single arm dumbbell row, just doing a unilateral exercise where you're just working one side.
Right.
I think has a lot of carryover. We talked about on an Instagram post, or I think it was last week. We got a client who's coming in right now. He's off a shoulder surgery. And, one of his big things that he was telling me about was, hey, like, I don't know if I want to train my non-injured arm right now because I don't want it to get super big and my other side be weak. And then I'm trying to bench press and it's all like, lopsided. And there's someone that's way stronger, which the research actually shows that training the non-injury arm has a crossover effect to the injured side. It's neurological. So there's no direct training going on the injured side, but because you're still training that non-injured arm, it has carryover to the injured arm. And it actually helps preserve strength rather than you just completely lose everything. So it's a really cool technique to still maintain strength, is to continue training that side. So that's where I think unilateral training is a big benefit.
Of course.
So single arm dumbbell rows, we do a lot of those with him. But I would like to get into probably my most favorite posterior chain exercise.
Okay.
Whenever I did my interview here at Personal Edge with Garrett, he was like, you want to go walk around the facility and just kind of check everything out? I was like, oh yeah, of course. So we walk downstairs and I'm kind of scoping out the floor and I look over there in the corner and my eyes just lit up, and we had a reverse hyper over there in the corner.
JC, yeah.
And I just knew, hey, this is where I need to be. Like they know what they're doing. So, but yeah,
awesome. We're going to make sure we put that in our HR.
Reverse hyper. So I think that is one of the most forgot about posterior chain exercise. Like people just don't ever think about it.
Right.
A lot of gyms don't have them.
Sure.
But I think it's one that should be in every facility.
Absolutely.
In terms of low back health, it's really great for strengthening the posterior chain, but it's also a great way to decompress the spine, which I think is a really neat exercise. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the reverse hyper, what it is, it's a reverse hyperextension of the back. So you hold on to a platform with your hands, and then your legs are hanging off the end, and then you swing your legs up. It's a reverse extension of the back. And what's really cool about it is a lot of exercises that we do are compressive. If you think about it, the back squat, it's a very compressive exercise, but in using an exercise like the reverse hyper, it helps decompress the spine. So, a lot of people can benefit from that as well.
Absolutely.
So I think that's my personal favorite.
No, definitely. And the reason I screamed out GHD on that was that how many times we use those in conjunction. Because you're doing the reverse hyper. One thing, in that drop down position, basically laying, like Charlie was saying, you're laying on your stomach, holding on. That's basically isolated, and you're dropping your legs down, and then actually pulling them up even, and sometimes doing it with weight. And so using your lower back muscles to do that. But we use that in conjunction a lot of times with the GHD because we're doing negative hamstring work or even positive negative hamstring work on the GHD, working those hamstrings. Because from my training experience, strengthening those hamstrings goes in conjunction with, of course, strengthening the lower back at the same time.
Yeah, it's a chain. And I mean, those two, I alternate back and forth all the time in our athletic development program because I think they're staples that we got to keep in there.
Absolutely.
Strengthening the posterior chain. I think those two right there, I don't think I'll ever take them out just because of how valuable I really think they are. Yeah.
Extremely. Well, and you were talking about that in a lot of facilities not having a reverse hyper, but it's the same thing we have with the multi-hip machine. And not only do clients or customers of a facility not know how to use it, but a lot of trainers don't understand it. A lot of them don't understand posterior chain and understand how to use that machine effectively. And how much, again, all of this adds to performance.
Sure,
You know? Besides the fact of, as I always want to bring up as time passes on the calendar, and it's not just for athletes, we use it all the way up. And in fact, the reverse hyper, when I originally got that machine, I probably was thinking more about my senior clientele than I was about because of how many people don't work the lower back, Anyway, all of this stands true throughout our clientele, through all the different ages.
Yeah, it's extremely undervalued, but there is an incredible benefit if you do it consistently. And it's hard. It's actually a lot more hard than it looks. People will do it and they'll think, oh, this can't be that bad. But like you said, you can add weight to it, and as you progress it's very challenging.
It sounds like such a detailed topic, we're really pulling a straw out of a haystack here. But it's not true that there's so much to this particular side of it. And the reason Charlie wanted to do this was the fact that how often this is neglected and how much it does affect performance. It does affect overall health, for that matter. And if you have any more questions about that, feel free to not only reach out to me, but you can reach out to Charlie at Charlie at personaledgefitness.com. You'd be more than glad to answer your questions about this, especially if we've gone over some of these exercises. And since we're doing this mostly audio, and even on the video, we're not really doing examples of it. If you have any questions about how to conduct the exercises or how to integrate that into your program, feel free to reach out to Charlie. You can also call the show at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can reach me, Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. That's our website and our Facebook page. Hit us up on X at Team PE. So the backside of the body, one of my favorites to work, actually, and I should have said that at the very beginning, the hamstring curl being my favorite actual machine because of how much it's tied to that lower back. But this is why we attack it from a 360 approach.
Yeah.
This is why we attack not only every athlete comes in here, but every client that comes in here from a comprehensive, because all of it's connected. It is a chain.
Yep.
Having that weakest link is where you're going to find your damage or where you're going to find your problems. We want to make sure you don't hit that, because that's just one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.